Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Damjan Denoble. This is an H-2B video update. It's January 21st, 2025, 12:11 p.m. And we have a lot to go through. Okay, so, on January 7th, we received our, visa, our results from the H-2B lottery. And there wasn't much action after that. I didn't get a first action on the more than 50 applications that I filed until last week. And over the weekend, they've started to trickle in. First action means that you're either getting a notice of deficiency, usually and hopefully something minor to fix a job order. We'll talk about kind of trends I'm seeing in job orders, NODs, okay? Or an acceptance or a notice or bigger notice of deficiency where you have something kind of fundamentally wrong with your application according to DOL. Anyway, I didn't start getting them until last week. And indeed, if we look at where we are with processing, there have been, out of the 2,105 applications, 881 as of today have received a first action. Okay, so that's a notice of acceptance or notice of deficiency. That's 41%, representing only 13,997 workers. Again, that's an NOA or an NOD. Typically, in a typical year, you can expect a notice of deficiency rate for first applications to be northwards of 55% first-time applications. For second-time applications, we don't know, but somewhere 10 to 25%, usually smaller technical NODs, okay? So that's kind of where we're at with that. But let's go through some of the numbers, because I didn't cover the numbers ever. So let me tell you kind of what we're looking at. What's the baseline application numbers? There were 8,759 applications requesting a total of 149,953 H-2B positions for the April 1st, 2025 start date. Okay, and you can see that that's if you add up all of these groups, that's how many applications you'll get. So don't just look at Group A. Look at Group A through Group G. Though that's the total 8,759 applications. Okay, but it's interesting. The number of applications is roughly the same as we saw last year, but the number of requested positions is up by 8%. I wouldn't have expected that. Nobody watching this would have expected that, because we expected the number of positions being requested to go down since a lot of employers have been moving to a March 1st start date. That's outside the lottery. That's where you're trying to get these returning workers. We can talk about how that went this year. That had some nasty surprises for employers. But most people, we thought that number would go down. But if you look at the applications, there's a single filer who filed 442 applications for companies with no prior filing history, which is very unusual. Just to give you an idea, 442 is an insane number of applications. The top filers, right? So agents who file this, if you're filing 80 applications to 100, like, that's a really big deal. That's a big file. I filed 89 applications last year, and that was like working triple overtime. The biggest filers maybe get in 100, 120, 140. 442 is insane. And, one might speculate that a lot of those are going to get NODs or denials. So that's what I think is driving up the number of requested positions going up by 8%. Okay, so that's just something interesting. I'll pay attention to that particular filer's outcomes this year. All right. If we look at how the numbers stack up over the past few years, specifically, we said, there's been an 8% increase in position. Last year, 138,000 positions were requested for April 1. But that was a decrease from the year before, when we had 142,000 positions in 2023. In 2022, we had 136,000 positions requested. And in 2021, we had 96,000. That was kind of like a trough, because that was one of the pandemic years. So 136,000 was typical. 149,000 is just really high. But the number of applications dropped to 8,759 from 8,817 in 2024. That's really just kind of interesting. Okay. So the big thing again is that the number of applications this year dipped just a bit, down 0.7% to be exact, but the number of positions requested jumped by 8%. Okay. So that's the big headline. And we went through Group G again this year, just like last year. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. As a reminder, 33,000 positions, more or less, are in Group A. You can see here it's actually 34,000 positions, and then around 20,000 positions in each group until it's filled, going down to Group G, which is at 14,000 positions. All right, so what are you to make of this? All right, so All right, so what you're to make of this is that probably, right, as in prior years, Group A's can all count on getting new workers. About 40% of Group B's can expect to get new workers. Why? Well, some in Group A are not going to use new worker applications. They might need returning workers. They might just need Colombian workers. They may have workers who are in the US. And indeed, as a filer who's a good member of the H-2B community, you encourage your employers not to use new worker petitions if they don't have to, so we can maximize the number of employers getting H-2B workers each year. So that's why Group B might end up with a rate of around 40% of them getting new workers. Groups B, C, and D will all likely get their returning workers from this allotment of 19,000 workers that's available. That's B, C, and D, with some in Group E getting them. Now, that's based on internal analysis done by the seasonal employer, C-Labor, okay, Seasonal Employer Association, right, this lobby group. So if you filed for a first half returning worker and you're in Group A, B, C, D, you can get returning workers for sure. If you're in Group A, new workers and returning workers. In Group B, maybe you get new workers, you're definitely getting returning workers. But if you're in Group E, F, or G, well, then you're probably looking at Central American workers, or you're going to want to reapply for the May 15th deadline, okay? So this is, what does that mean? So there's an additional allotment of returning workers on May 15th. And so again, if you're in Group E, F, G, and you really need returning workers, then you're probably going to look at having to reapply for that May 15th start date. Now, there's only going to be about 5,000 to 6,000 workers allocated for that May 15th start date. So you're not even guaranteed to get those. Just keep that in mind if you're moving your date. But then there's this other final allotment of Central American workers, and those should be available there should be enough of those available for everybody who wants it, because what happens over the course of this, a lot of people drop out, so even though, what did we say, 49,000 positions have been requested, you're probably going to see 20 to 30% of those drop out just because they don't want to wait, and the timing is not right. And so everybody who needs a worker ends up usually getting one if they use the Central American allotment, or they're willing to recruit workers that are in the US who are outside of the cap. All right, so that's the big thing. That's kind of the numbers. People ask me, what should we be thinking about? That's what I tell my clients that you should be thinking about. Let's talk about what we might see in this new administration. Every time you have a change in governmental administration in this country, from one party to another, you have different priorities, you have different interpretations of the law. So as far as we are counting on, we being agents, lawyers, longtime filers in this program, the allocations are set in stone for this cycle. But we do expect in the coming years, as early as next October 1st cycle, that there will be no extra allocations. That is a distinct possibility. We also are not 100% sure that the H-2B program will continue as it's been designed. We know that President Trump loves this program. He uses it in Mar-a-Lago. We know that John Thune, who's head of the Senate, is a champion for this program. We know that a lot of Republicans in general have supported the H-2B and H-2A programs, right? This is kind of the backbone of the farming workforce, the backbone of the hospitality industry. There are a lot of Republicans in small businesses who have made it known that they like this program. But despite that, we just don't know what's going to happen. So it's something that we will keep monitoring. So if you're planning on this program for the long term, you have to keep that in mind, that this change in administration does matter. I think at the very least, we might be looking at just a reduced number of additional allocations, which means that the number of visas in the program are becoming even more scarce. So it's going to be even more important to keep track of workers who are in the country. It's going to be even more important to make sure that those workers transition from a fall job to a winter job, potentially at another employer, so that it can come back to you the next year, outside of the cap. And we might be able to, if that's the way we do it, then we got about 3 years of doing that before those workers' maximum work time of 3 years is used up. And then what happens, I don't know. But that's the main kind of worry about this program, is that there will just be major changes in that additional allocation. But here in the short term, I don't anticipate many changes. Now, where can we see challenges? We could see challenges in consular processing. We don't know how these new executive orders that purport to close the border, that purport to increase vetting of people's medical records, people's work records, are going to affect consular processing. They're not going to speed it up, but they certainly could slow it down. That could mean that workers come in later. This is all speculation at this point. We will see, but it's something that smart employers should plan for because it's entirely possible, right? We not only are we changing out staff at a lot of these consulates, the process workers coming into the country, not only are we drastically looks like changing the mix of personnel, military, security, diplomatic personnel that are going to be at the border, but we're having to do all this while continuing to administer these programs. And if you've seen what happens when governments change in other countries, which we see all the time because we see the effect on what we call government ministries in other places like El Salvador last year, notably, and other Central American countries, well, there are slowdowns. It's just kind of what happens. So I would anticipate some slowdowns in consular processing, something for you to think about. What else is important here? So I think the other thing that's going to be important here is we have these regulatory changes that were announced at the end of last year that hit January 17th, which increase fees on employers who don't comply with the program, which got rid of the H-2B country list so that in technically every country is not eligible for H-2B. I don't know if those still hold. Okay, that's the part that I'm questioning. Like, if we're reversing a lot of Biden policies, could we see a reversal of the H-2B country list, which was gotten rid of in part, I think, to undermine the ability of the H-2B program itself to be canned, because the H-2B countries list had to be renewed every year. And one of the Project 2025 goals said, well, we'll just not renew the H-2B countries list to kind of end this program. And there's been a lot of internal fight between kind of traditional Republicans, more, let's say, hardcore all immigration program Republicans on this issue. So if I do start hearing, hey, we're going to bring back the countries list, or we're going to kind of reverse the countries list piece, then I will start talking a little bit more about what the curtailment of this program could look like. So that's it for now. Those are my thoughts. You should be, if you're in Group A, starting, seeing some notices of action. It might not be this week, right? We're only 40% through. I only started seeing a trickle last week. They started kind of speeding up over the weekend. I think Group A could take another 2 weeks to process. So, it's the 21st now, 20th January. It could be start of February until we see Group B start processing. That means that we won't hit the cap until middle of February, which means that we won't hear about the additional allotment of workers being announced until middle of February, because it's going to be 15 days after we officially hit the cap. So there's a lot of things to keep track of. So stick with us, send off this channel to other people if you find it helpful. And thank you so much. So that's it. That's it for me. This is Damjan Denoble, H-2B update. I hope it's helpful, and Happy New Year, everyone.